and we've got another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. Over the next couple of weeks, we are going to explore power and control. This week, we are going to look at what that means for survivors and the tactics that perpetrators will use in order to maintain the power and control within an abusive relationship. Next week, we're going to look at the power and control from a professional's perspective, basically a what not to do guide. And then we're going to conclude with an episode on the ultimate power and control in relation to strangulation. What we know is domestic abuse is a pattern of different behaviours used to gain or maintain the power and control within the relationship. We're going to look at the power and control wheel. This power and control wheel was developed by the Domestic Abuse Intervention Project in Minnesota, America. I would suggest that if you want to follow along, you can just Google the power and control wheel and many images. Doesn't matter which one. They're all the same image. And we're going to go through all those different elements. In the diagram, if you've got that up, you'll see a wheel made up of, I would say, Trivial Pursuit segments. And those are the tactics that an abuser will use in order to maintain that power and control. In its original form, when it was created in the 1980s, it kind of stemmed from a task group of female survivors, and they were looking at the male perpetrators' tactics that are used. Over the years, society's changed and it's evolved, and the wheel has evolved, and now you can get many different versions of the power and control wheel. But we're going to use it in its original form. So we're going to assume that the victim is a she, so the pronoun is likely to be she or her, and we're going to assume that the perpetrator is going to be male. And so the pronouns for that will be him or he. We know that domestic abuse disproportionately affects females. I also acknowledge that men can be victims of domestic abuse, and we are going to be doing an episode about male victims. But for the purpose of this week's episode, we're going to be looking at this diagram in its original form, where it would assume that the female is the victim and the male is the perpetrator. The wheel is a diagram. Hopefully you've got that up in front of you. And it's the different tactics that an abusive partner will use to keep their victims within that relationship. There will be one or more of these different elements, those different segments that will make up that subtle, continual behaviour in order to maintain that power and control. And if you've got the image, you've got the outside wheel, which is in black, with the overarching physical and sexual violence. That's the ultimate act in order to keep that person within the position in that relationship. So the perpetrator has the dominance within that relationship. So we're going to decipher all of these little elements that are often used. We understand that the complexity of abusive relationships can never be summarized completely in one diagram. But this particular model presents a useful lens in how to kind of examine domestic violence. So we're going to look at those different elements now. And we're going to start with the first segment, which is using intimidation. So using intimidation, an abuser is likely to make her feel quite afraid by using looks or actions or gestures. I don't know if you have children, but when your child is doing something wrong, often you only have to look at the child for it to stop its behaviour. Can be quite useful. In a relationship where there is abuse, it's not useful. It is a complete tactic in order to shut her down by looking at her in a certain way. So she's on eggshells. So she's thinking, what have I done? And she could just be sat there, or she could have just been laughing at the TV, or she could have been smiling at a text message, and they're using particular gestures in order to rein her back in. Smashing things. So using that kind of intimidating method of smashing things, he's lost his mind, he's angry, he's frustrated, and he starts smashing up things. What is kind of interesting about smashing things, though, is that often he's smashing her things, not smashing his. So often survivors will say, well, they just got angry and he didn't know what he was doing. Well, I would challenge that slightly by asking and by saying, if there was a knock at the door, would that behaviour stop? If I was to walk into a room, would that behaviour where the intimidation stop because we're now in a group of people? Because if it does stop and he's able to switch it on and off, then that isn't somebody that has got that red mist that's going on. That is somebody that is very much in control of their behaviours and they know exactly what they're doing. So by smashing her things, that doesn't tell me that somebody's got really angry and that they don't know what they're doing. That is a deliberate tactic in order for her to retreat back into her shell. Sometimes that can include abusing animals, pets, cats, dogs, any other animal, especially if the victim has some form of connection with that pet, cat or dog. A perpetrator is likely to threaten to hurt the animal as a way to be able to evoke some reaction out of her. Displaying weapons, so those that like to collect guns or knives or any other material that could be used as a way to intimidate. So that is a particular tactic that's used in order to keep her within that relationship. Then we'll move around the ring, and it's like using the emotional abuse. So what does that actually mean? Well, it's the constant put downs. It's the subtle digs. It's making her feel bad about herself. Why are you wearing that? You look fat. You've put on a bit of weight. Oh, I don't like your hair like that. It's those really subtle comments where it's a drip, 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 where she's now starting to feel bad about herself. Calling her names, you're fat, you're ugly, you're this, you're that, swearing at her, Making her think that she's crazy. We've done an episode about gaslighting, so I'm not going to go into that. Playing those particular mind games. For example, deliberately hiding keys. Deliberately hiding keys and feigning innocence. No, I don't know where your keys are. I've not seen your keys. Humiliating her. Maybe in a group full of people when you're out. Making her the butt of the joke. Making her feel guilty. Making her feel guilty that she wants to spend time with her children or her family or her friends. Well, you can't love me very much if you want to spend time with X, Y, and Z. So using that emotional abuse in order to keep her in that position. Yeah, can we see what where we're going with this? And we've only done 2 of the tactics. Using isolation. What does that mean? Well, controlling what she does, who she speaks to, where she goes, who she talks to, what she's reading, who is she connecting with, limiting her, keeping her locked in the house. That could be an extreme, keeping her locked in the house. But actually, you can still keep somebody prisoner within their own home without locking the doors, by tracking her phone, by using the Ring doorbell, where you can record what's going on. So somebody could feel trapped within their own home because actually he's going to know that she's gone out, especially if he's tracking her phone, because he'd be able to see, tracking mileage in the car. So it prevents her from having the autonomy to be able to go out. Using jealousy to justify those actions. So having a strop because she wants to go out with her mates. And using, well, what, like, you must be having an affair, you must be cheating. Who's that man that you're talking to? Why are you wearing your hair like that? You're going to go and have sex with somebody else tonight. Using isolation as a way where people can't connect. People can't reach. Because when they do reach, there will be your friends, they don't know nothing. They're not there for you, and will use your secrets against you, and will use whatever you've told him about your friends or family as a way to be able to go, babe, nobody else understands you. It's because I love you so much. Minimising, denying and blaming. Well, what's interesting about this tactic is it's used by both the perpetrator and the survivor. The survivor is likely to minimise the abuse. He didn't punch me, he slapped me. He didn't mean to pull my hair. He didn't mean to kick me. He didn't mean to break my arm. So we're minimising the abuse, denying that the abuse is there. Again, going back to the gaslighting, denying that the abuse is even happened. When you're challenging, why did you just punch me? Why did you just slap me? Why did you just pinch me? I didn't. What are you talking about? I didn't. No, you just did. I've got a mark on my arm. I didn't do that. And convincing somebody that actually the abuse isn't happening. That's what the perpetrator's doing. But the victim is also denying. Because what happens when somebody is in an abusive relationship? We don't want to admit it. So we're in denial. We think that we're responsible for the abuse that we are being subjected to. We blame ourselves for the abuse. Well, if I weren't a mouthy cow last night, if I didn't interrupt him while he was watching his favourite football, if I didn't question him about the women that he was messaging, if I didn't challenge him about the pornography that he was watching, maybe I wouldn't have got the slap. Maybe I wouldn't have got the punched. Maybe I wouldn't have got the kick. Maybe I wouldn't have got the emotional abuse. Maybe I wouldn't have been told that actually if I was having sex with him when he wanted, he wouldn't feel the need to go chat to other women. So blaming ourselves for the abuse that we are experiencing. Now, what I want to say, and I can't stress this enough, that there is the responsibility of the behaviour of the abuse is never the fault of the person who is at the receiving end of that abuse. She is not to be blamed for the punch that she's just got, or the kick, or the strangulation. No. His actions, his words, his behaviours, his choices. He has to take ownership of that. And if we were better at supporting victims and letting victims know that they were not responsible for that abuse, then it might not take many, 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 many years of being able to undo that cycle of blame, shame and guilt. But the perpetrator does exactly the same. They will minimise the abuse. They will deny the abuse is there, and then they will blame the victim for the abuse that they were being subjected to, using exactly those same scenarios that I've just given you. Using children, so if there are children within that family dynamic, using the children to continue the abuse, either whilst they're still in the relationship, whilst they're still living as a family, or even post separation when somebody has left the relationship and there's contact. Using those children as a way to be able to send messages to the victim. Sometimes deliberate instructions from the perpetrator to the child to behave in a certain way. Family court is another way that perpetrators will continue that cycle of abuse through the children. Using male privilege. So what does that mean? Well, we still live in 2022 in a society where there is misogyny, where there is sexism, where there is this patriarchal hierarchy that goes on. And there are some men, not all men, but there are some men that will excuse their behaviours based on the society norms. Male roles and female roles. I can treat you like this because it's my right. If I want to have sex with my wife and my wife doesn't want to have sex, well, that's really none and void, because actually she's my wife and I want to have sex. So using this position of malehood, if that's such a word, of being able to dominate within the particular gender roles within the relationship, the attitude of being subservient, females are less than, they can't possibly be in control of the finances because she doesn't understand finances. So taking on that role, that male privilege, that male right, that I can treat her in whatever way I want to. No, you can't. No. Using economic abuse. So what does that look like? Well, that could be taking out loans in her name deliberately. That could be not allowing her to have the financial autonomy. So she's not allowed a bank account. Or if she's working, her wages going into his account. Hello? If there are children and benefits are being paid, but the benefits being paid directly to him, but she's the primary caregiver, and then she's got to beg to get her child food, nappies, milk. Using that tactic in order where she is relying on him financially. Giving her an allowance, a pittance of an allowance, which she has to account for. Receipts. He has the nicest grooming products, but she's got the value. There's already a dynamic going on there. Not letting her know about finances, taking out mortgages, and she doesn't know about it. So using that economic tactic in order that when and if she feels that she wants to leave, that actually she can't, because she doesn't know how to access money. She doesn't have any funds. She doesn't have the ability to be able to leave. Deliberate tactic. And then using coercion and threats. You don't actually ever have to hit anybody for it to be an abusive relationship. Being coercive is just enough for it to be abusive. Carrying out threats. Threatening to leave her. Threatening to end his life if you do leave. I can't live without you. If you leave, I'm going to kill myself. Nobody wants that on their conscience. So what do? We stay. Or if we do find the courage to leave, a deliberate self-harm or a deliberate overdose in order to bring her back. Reporting her to immigration if there are restrictions on visas, for example, especially if there is a spousal visa. If there's a spousal visa, it's unlikely that she's going to have recourse to public funds. She's not going to be able to necessarily access benefits or housing. But then we'll use immigration as a way to be able to go to keep her. Especially if she's a foreign national. We'll use the knowledge of the criminal and the civil justice system in the UK over her, because she doesn't know, she doesn't come from this country. Reporting her to social services. I'm going to tell social services that you're crazy, that you're mad, that you're mental, and I'm going to get the kids taken away from you. Making her do illegal things deliberately. So using the coercion and threats in order to have power and control, dominance, to continue the abuse. So that's just like a whistle-stop tour of the power and control wheel. In the next episode, we're going to look at, from a professional, and in particular from a healthcare professional, on what not to do. Until next week. And you've just listened to this week's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation this week. Feel free to like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out. And I'll see you next time.